Be right back.
Tell me she's gonna.
So, but it's impressive. That's what's little I understand from that.
They wouldn't. And the thing is, they wouldn't even tell you that. This is a corporation. Because you know we're used to it. The waiting to show up. Well, yeah, and then it's not have some. Yeah.
Okay, just in case that nothing works, they're going to stream it to everybody. So I do have some examples, so you can just see them here, so that we know what we're talking about, and the people watching it will see it too. So I don't think.
1 o'clock with Lynn and Tracy. You good with that? We got to do lunch.
Oh, we're gonna. Okay, let me let my 1 o'clock know.
Do you need to?
No, I can move her.
Okay. I'm so sorry. I just realized I was supposed to ask Judith something. And I got.
He didn't ask me. He told me for the record.
That would
hear a question
never,
in there. I didn't hear a
ever
question in
happen.
there.
That would not happen like that. I love my wife. I love my.
We have to cut at 12 o'clock sharp. So, all right. Okay, so we're going to start, and I am going to. Do we have a dongle? Maybe not. Keep going. Okay. So we're. I think it's fine. I think we got a solution. Yeah. Well, we're just gonna. They're gonna stream it. People at home are gonna see it, and I'll just show it here to them so they know what we're talking about. Okay. Okay. Excellent.
All right. Cool.
All right.
If not, we can try the Thunderbolts.
You want to try it? Just last.
You should be able to. He's getting a VGA cable. Plug it right into there and change the input.
Okay.
So
do I wait or?
let's wait a second. Let me see if I can get.
Okay, we're going to talk about translations. So let me take off this. And with us, and that will be the next slide for the people that are managing the our streaming. Here are our names. So Judith Anderle, who needs no introduction, Chief Commercial Officer of LMBPN. Michael, a.k.a. Miguel Rothman, author of 15, 16 books, something like that. All of them translated German and French. You're getting into French? Excellent. Jen Schulze, priorly with 4Media, his own company in Germany, and you're now translating all the books for LMBPN. Is that a...
All the books, but
microphones so people at home can hear you?
in Germany, I don't know if I will ever be able to translate all LMBPN's books, but 100%.
Oh, with effort and and resilience, you can do it. And myself, Enrique Parilla from Lantia, and we were talking with Mike earlier and about who we are. We're the largest self-publishing company in Spain, probably all of the Spanish-speaking world. We're going to talk about translations. So I'm going to show the slide that everybody's seeing at home, which is this one. And this is a world map that is distorted to represent the sizes of the internal markets of every country. You can see there that the US is obviously the most important market. You see Germany has a very nice, large internal market. China is an emerging power. We're talking about a market of around $144 billion. And this is the swimming pool in which we have to decide we want to jump into. The next slide, which is a little circle, shows the list of countries that are dominating the market. And I wanted to make a point here because whereas we see countries like the United States, China, Germany, United Kingdom, Japan, France, I wanted to make a point that it is not the same thing to sell in a country than to sell to a market. When we sell to the English-speaking market, we are selling to the US, the UK, we're selling to Australia, we're selling to anybody in any of these different markets that are able to read English. So the next slide, which we're going to see if we can get to in a second. So last-minute dongle issues. But it looks, no, thank you guys for your help. Now the monitor turned off. Darn it. So we're talking about how if you do publish in English, you have access to a market much larger than your country. You can sell in the UK, Australia, and then you have other types of challenges. And the next slide, which is a list of countries with a little top in red, shows you the list of the different markets that you can sell. Well, different countries, right? US, China, Germany, UK, Japan, France, India, Korea, Spain, Italy, etc. And for people at home, at the end, there's going to be an email address, and I can send you the presentation if you want to see the data and just are curious about the different sizes of the different international markets. But I wanted to point out, in the idea of selling to markets and not to countries, that if we do group the languages, you see that English is a $44 billion market, 44 billion euro, so a few more dollars. Mandarin is 21 billion, so China is half the size. It's not as much as it looks in that map. And German is still a very powerful market with 9 billion. But Spanish, when you combine all the different countries that speak Spanish, Spain, Mexico, Argentina, and all of the South American region, then you get to a 7 billion euro market. So it is, if you're thinking of translating, those are the markets in which you should be thinking of moving, just because they are the ones that have the most purchasing power. That's where you can get the most out of your money. We're going to give our tech team here a second. All right, look at that. Big round of applause, man. Excellent. Okay, so I think it's important to consider that if you want to translate your book to Spanish, you're not selling to one particular country. You're not selling to Mexico. You're selling to a market of 7 billion people. So with all this data in mind, question to Michael, since you're an author here that has translated all his books, should our authors even think of translating their books?
Absolutely. I can tell you firsthand that I mean, it's a complicated story, but in the long run, what I ended up finding is
you have time. You have like all of 6 minutes.
Yeah, yeah. In the end, I ended up finding, my first translations were in German, that they were at least as lucrative sometimes, as far as the royalties I was seeing coming out of Germany, as it was in the U.S.
On which channels? On which channels?
I primarily do Amazon, for all my distributions in Germany. Now I also have Ingram as a wholesaler for the paperback and stuff, and I don't have an explanation as to why, but for whatever reason, 30% of my royalties out of Germany are paperback. Okay. So. But it's been very, I've been very pleased with the results.
And I'm very interested to hear about the themes, because I think that a big part of that must be the type of writing that you do. But
yeah. So I primarily write techno-thrillers. I write hard science fiction. I'm starting to play a little bit with like lit RPG type of things, but and all of them so far have been well received.
Okay. So. Judith, what do you think? Should all the authors think about translating their books, or are there times where you're better off sticking to a particular market?
So I think it's an interesting question. So your question is translating your book, and that implies book of one, right? I think that if you're going to go into translations into the markets, you definitely should have more than one book. If you have a series, you're better off. When Jens is able to provide his input, he can speak to our first-hand experience in German, where, unless maybe you're like Harry Potter, the first book or something that became really huge on its own. But otherwise, I think that I would suggest that you wait until you have a successful series and then go into that expense of time and effort and everything else. That would be the suggestion I would have. So yes, definitely yes, if you have a series. Okay,
excellent. Jens, you've been translating material for 18 years. How important is this, in your opinion, to an author? I mean, is this something they should be thinking about?
Yeah, I think they should think about. And the nice thing is that I would say, for example, I have only experience on the German market, that you can use a lot of the same genres that are working in English are really working in German, for example. I personally do fantasy, urban fantasy, science fiction, and lit RPG at the moment because that's what I'm breathing for. And but I think, for example, fantasy and science fiction was always very strong in German throughout the history of the written book. And of course, there may be countries where some genre didn't work. But my experience from German is that everything that works in English works very well in German as well. Okay. And of course, at the moment, I'm only doing series because that's really interesting. If you have one reader hooked, the chance is very high that he's reading through the series.
Excellent. So it looks like the consensus of the panel is that you should absolutely go and translate. That's great. I want to pick on the themes. I mean, how we have to distinguish between translating a series or a book, and just thinking how we enter into new markets. I want to give an example. This is a book, The 10X Rule, by Grant Cardone. This was translated to Spanish as the Golden Rule, the golden rule of business. This is a situation where you see that the translation perhaps made the meaning of the original book, which is the ability to grow your business 10x, it kind of got lost in the message. I mean, the Golden Rule is a very generic title. But the problem that you have in the smaller European markets is that it is very unrealistic that a business can grow 10x. So then you have, okay, this thing which everybody in the US looks forward to, you know, how do we get to 10? How do we get to 100? It's not realistic when you go to Italy or Portugal or Spain. I mean, so they had to take some creative licensing to adapt that. We've seen that in other media too. This is the poster for Black Panther in the US versus China. And we'll let everybody draw their conclusions as to why that poster was changed. And the same thing with Star Wars. We can see that those works were adapted to find themselves more comfortable in their respective markets. It doesn't only happen in China. We have here another movie example, but I think they're far more popular, 12 Years a Slave. Studio received a lot of backslash when in Italy they used the posters of secondary characters to promote the movie as opposed to the main character. So with these type of things in mind and considering the different subtleties of new market, question is, how do you, so to you, Mike, who you're writing on a very specific genre, have you ever had to consider, or did you choose Germany because this genre worked on it, or did you consider trying to modify or adapt your stories, or how do you differentiate between translating or entering the German market, for example?
Sure. So I've always had kind of, when I write, I write with the mind of targeting an international audience in general. So a lot of my scenes will happen kind of internationally as a part of the story anyway. So it was very easy for me, at least, to take what I had already written in English and move it over. I think there are definitely different sensitivities in some things. I mean, I think working with a translator, you'll be educated on some things like, all right, maybe the bad guy shouldn't be one of the German government officials. Maybe we'll switch it to something else, so there's certain things that are adopted, and I mean, talking to certain marketing folks of the location or of the target countries, there are certain sensitivities even on the covers. So it's not just the word; it's the content of the story, and obviously even the wrapping, the cover. I was told, that bomb that you have on the front cover of the American side, that's probably not a good idea. On the German side, at least that was the advice I was given, kind of by several people. So
how do you adapt? Do you have a team that helps you? Do you take time to do it?
I should have a team, but right now I'm brute forcing it.
Okay.
But ideally, what I would have is a person that would handle, like I interact with a translator. I interact with any marketing folk. I find the skills that are in the native tongue and interact with them directly myself. I don't have the time to do that, but I do it anyway. But ideally, I should have a team, or if there were a publishing house, if I was interacting with a publishing house, obviously the publishing house would, interact, would do that as well. But I think, and I guess my point is that even as a, independent writer, doing your own thing, no staff, no secretaries, no anything, I'm an example of it can be done, and you can do it, well into six figures just for international translations.
Judith, you guys are translating a lot of content. How
Yes.
much time do you have to put into that idea, the fact that you're entering a new market?
So we don't look at it as, well, we do look at the opportunity market size. We have unfortunately learned both good and bad. We tried to enter the Spanish market about 4 years ago, and because digital wasn't, or KU wasn't as advanced as it is now, we literally hit against the wall. In Germany, we've been very successful, and the key, not because Jens is here, so I'm not pandering to him, but we've been very successful because he's taken Mike's model into marketing, and so he actively markets the books. But I think going back to the thinking of the translations, I think Mike has a saying, and I don't know if he borrowed from someone else, but a good editor can make a so-so book better, right? And a bad editor can take a good book and make it bad. Likewise, a translator, you have to hire the right people because and you have to trust who you're working with, because you have to give up a lot of control. You have to trust that this person, when they tell you, hey, that bomb in front of the American embassy is not going to play well in this market. And as a creator, that's your baby, right? And somebody's telling you your baby needs to change from blue eye to brown eye. And some people don't want that. But you have to give up that control. But you can only give it up to somebody that you trust. Like Mike explicitly trusts Jens, and Jens will say this is the title and this is what it should be. And we do the same in French, and we do the same in Italian. We do the same in Dutch. We trust the people that we're working with to tell us and guide us in the markets that we're in.
So Jens, when you get all these titles, I mean, how do you assess the impact that they may have on the different markets? Do you look at the content at all, or you are straight up for translating the story?
Yeah, I have the advantage that I know most of the books that I'm currently translating because it evolved that I was being a fan of him. And for example, you have to really look into the new markets if there are, for example, any problems. For example, in Germany, there is a law that when you put a book out and you have a title, it's like secured for you. And so we always have to check if there is prior work there for that. And for example, Mike's first book, Death Become Her, that's the English name of the movie, as most of you most likely know. And if I use the same translation as a movie, I would have a problem that I would use the same title. So there is a lot of trust in it that I explain then to the author, in this case it was Michael, that are saying, hey, this didn't work, but my idea is that, and can you live with that? Okay. And for example, another thing is, I just recently had a book from Eric Ackland, a lit RPG book, and the title was Skulls and Thrones, which is a wordplay with skulls and bones, the jail secret student society, and nobody in Germany knows that. And that's a problem, and I make a suggestion then related to the Freemasons. I sent it to Eric and said, hey, that is a problem. Are you okay with that? And he said directly, yes, okay. And that's the stuff you have to cope in German, for example. And I think there are multiple different examples in other markets.
Okay, so Michael, on the same topic of entering new markets, one of the greatest weapons for the indie author is their ability to be engaged with their readers. And through this conference, people have spoken a lot about the importance of remaining engaged with your readers, interacting, listening to them, getting feedback, etc. You're publishing all your titles in German. How do you interact with your German readers?
Well, Google Translate helps a lot, but actually, I do very much what I do on my English titles. I do the same thing in German. I usually have at the end of the book a call to action. It's like, it's an author's note, me talking to the reader directly, and I'll say, hey, I've got a mailing list. I would suggest you join because that'll be a sure way to get in touch with me or learn about new things. And I have one for Germans. I have one for the English speaking, and I have them sorted. And even though I will say one thing. Well, once you find a translator that you trust, you hug them and keep them close, and you don't let them go, because they help immensely when it comes to any of these things. I mean, yeah, sure, Google Translate's good enough maybe for a little email here or there. People will forgive you. They know that you're a native English speaker, let's say. But if it's for ad copy or any of these other things, little things, you don't want to hire a contract to do a 10-line ad copy translation, but you want it to be exactly right. Well, you leverage your resources as best you can.
So Judith, I mean, that was him, just one author managing his content. In your case, you guys have a massive library of content. You have a lot of titles. How do you manage things like, social media, comments, things that may pop up that are important to your brand how do you manage that?
So we've recently gone through a sort of change. For the longest time, it was our international was German. That was it, right? So we were lucky in that Jens was in the industry, and so we utilized a lot of his for Verlag, and so. But now recently, because now we've expanded it to other languages, and frankly, to your point, we're segmenting, right? We're making sure that our German fans understand LMBPN is German and LMBPN is French, LMBPN is Dutch, and LMBPN is Italian. We've actually created email addresses, and so we're transitioning from Verlag to now LMBPN, so that our fans understand that LMBPN is the driver. And but I think to your point, it does go back to the trust. And even now what we're going through this transition. For example, if a fan writes and asks a question in German, yeah, I can use Google Translate, but with all due respect, we respect our fans. So I go to the expert, and so I check with Jens, and he laughs at me, right? This is stupid translation, and then he gives me the right translation. But I don't mind going through that to make sure that we provide our fans in their particular language the correct translation. And we'll do that same for French as well, in Dutch and in Italian.
Jens, I think you wanted to add
And
something?
yeah, I think it's really important that you cultivate an own community of your local fans. In this case, I'm answering all the stuff on Facebook, and we try to make it up because we don't have the marketing power of a traditional publishing company. So we are relating on Facebook, on social media, that people tell about your books, and of course, I would say, the marketing that, for example, Amazon is giving you with also read by. And it's really important to give your fans the feeling that even if the author is is an Englishman, and that there is someone caring for their needs. And that for us it's important that we answer very fast, within 24 hours. And of course we have a really tight release channel with 70 books a year in German. And so the people are always asking, hey, when comes the next book out? Of course, it's annoying for us, but it shows me that the fans are really, really cool with us, that we are answering them directly, that we are releasing fast. That is very important for them, because they are used to that they have to wait a year or a year and a half. Of course, the downside is after a while, they get used to it, and they are complaining when you need 3 months.
Actually, if I may follow up to that, Jens is correct. So when we work with a translator, for example, we emulate. We follow Mike, right? So Jens followed Mike's model. Our French Alex Garcia, he follows so in other words, we ask that they don't just translate a book and turn it over to us. They have to actively engage with our fans on Facebook. So Alex looks at the Facebook page for French. Eduard looks for the Facebook page in Dutch. And Mauro looks at the Facebook page in Italian. Like, we're actively asking of this. And, Jens has set the stage for them, and they see the newsletters that come out and everything. And so we utilize a lot of the English, but again, each of our translators actively engage with our fans so that they feel like they're being listened to.
Oh my goodness, that sounds like a lot of work. so your authors have decided that yes, they do want to translate. They realize that they have to interact with the customer, with the readers. and they have to be an essential part of the team. So where do we find translators?
All right, so I'm hoping she gives a different answer. So, realistically, I think there are a variety of services and websites that you can find people who hang a shingle up and say, I'm a translator. But here's the caveat. And this is really, really important because these are people you're going to have to engage in a relationship that you trust. And most people who are translators think about it from an English perspective. Could anyone translate a menu, a restaurant menu? The answer is, of course, yes, because the context doesn't really matter. It's like a hamburger, that's fine. But think about it from we're talking about books, literary works. So and lots of people in the U.S. are fluent in reading and writing English, but how many of them are skilled in writing a story and one that's pleasant and not clunky to read? That's a much smaller population. So you're not looking for a translator. You're looking for someone who is a writer in that native language. And so the approach I took, and this may be unconventional, but it's worked for me. I went to other major authors, David Baldacci, et cetera, et cetera. I'm going, all right, who's translating his stuff? And let's see if I can harass and find the translators, because usually the translators are listed.
Right.
And I'll go, oh, okay, there's this, whoever it is. Like, let me see if I can find their email address. And I'll just, it's an equivalent of a cold call, and I'll reach out and I go, hey, I noticed you translated this. In my mind, I've established some trust that if somebody else has trusted that person to translate that major, author's book, I'm going to trust this person if I can reach out. And
so you're getting a known entity, that
a known entity, absolutely, okay. Because
has that ever worked? Did the translator
it's
David
absolutely
work for
me.
you?
It worked for me.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this touches with some of the earlier panels that Judy was part of, the importance of reaching out and staying in touch and not being afraid of
right. Like for instance, my translator in German does David Baldacci, does Larry Correa, et cetera. Yeah. I mean, so. Yeah.
We're gonna get in. I want to pop a question, but I'm gonna wait to hear from Judith on this. Where do you find translators?
Yeah. So the synthesis is that, and by the way, networking, poaching, same thing, right? So, when I first joined LMBPN, we went the traditional route, looking for translators, because in our mind we have to be outside of English for the opportunity. But frankly, we encountered that dry translation type of thing, and so we actually waited. So Jens was a fan. And when we were coming to Frankfurt and Mike posted that he was coming to Frankfurt, Jens says, hey, I'm a fan. Oh, and by the way, I work in the translation business already, because he had a business that's translating newspapers, right, and for hotels in cruise ships. And so then I left him alone, and they talked for hours and hours. So back to my talk on networking, you have to trust the person. So that's how Jens came aboard. For French, French author reached out to me and said, hey, I'm interested. I met him on Zoom. We have to find out if this person is, and likewise, same thing, Edouard in Dutch. He's a science fiction author, and he writes already in Dutch. And so these are people that, are not just translators or not their jobs. Their passion is into what they like about Mike. And so that's why I think it works for us. And then telling the same thing, he reached out to us, and he actually licensed Storms of Magic, because he's a fan. And he was a publishing company in Italy, and now he's exclusively, just like Jens, coming to translate exclusively for LMBPN. But it's basically people whose heart is in the stories.
Yeah, I would say, for example, I have a team of 25 employees at the moment, and funnily, most of the people I hire are from that one person says, hey, please ask this guy, and he may be a real fit. And I have also some beta readers that are the readers that are volunteers, fans of the series, that are, I would say, the last line of defense to find some typos before it goes to the customer, the books. And some of them I've hired because they showed a real devotion, and they said, they are so good, I need them as an editor.
It's a heavily networked a community. I mean, people know each
yeah.
other, they refer each
And I
other.
try to always find people that are actually reading and loving books of this genre. For example, I've had a lady that was doing lit RPG for me, and I'm in the 4th and 5th book. I've seen she was fighting herself through the book, and I said, "We will stop it now. You get a new series," and she now has a real good urban fantasy series, and she's totally in it. So she is 50% faster than before. And that's always that you find the correct people for the correct genre.
So Michael, going back to your ability to find highly valued translators, which I think is fascinating, I think is great. I think the question that everybody has in their mind is, how much do they have to pay for a translation?
Actually, that's really a good question, because
That's what we do.
I've seen the numbers all over the place, but you know, if we actually want,
A range is fine. Some people be here have no idea.
Right. Now, to be realistic, what I've also found, and this is kind of like the red flag, when you see somebody who's a lot cheaper than, you know, if you find some people that seem to be highly qualified, but you're like, oh, that's expensive, and you see somebody who's going to do it for like a fourth the price, there's usually a reason, and so I've paid, you know, let's say for a 100,000 word book, give or take, that can cost anywhere from $4,000 to $10,000.
Okay.
Yeah, so I mean, give or take, and that's pretty. I mean, but you'll find lots of people who will take that and go, "I'll do it for $1,300," and you know, I always ask for samples, and so this is another thing, an approach. If you're actually using any of these services that try to hook you up with talents or, you know, translators or whatever, you always ask for a sample, and then you have someone you trust who's a reader, maybe not a writer, and go, all right, tell me how is this good, you know, because oftentimes it's garbage, you know, and that's what I've found personally.
Okay.
For us, it's a revenue share, because what we're looking for is partners in the business. Because again, we ask them to go beyond just translating the book, right? They interact with the fans and everything, and so it's a straight revenue share.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do they, I mean, without giving out numbers, is
They
it
get
reasonable?
overpaid. They get overpaid.
Okay. Okay.
It's essentially the same.
Okay, so they have made the decision to translate their book. They have found the right translator. They've gone into marketing. They got their teams. They have translated their book. Where do they need to give the account number so they can start getting euros? Is it as simple as that? Or does the work start now, where you have to do everything that you've done in your market now towards that market? I mean, how much work does it go into promoting a foreign market?
Okay, so like promotion, well, obviously to literally get the euros, it's actually very simple, especially if you're doing it through Amazon, and you just dump it into your account. And it's the first time, you know, I mean, once I started translating, it's the first time I really truly started getting annoyed by the money market and the exchange rates and everything else, and seeing the fluctuations. Those really started to bother me after a while. So, but setting that aside, you know, advertising, and yeah, I think your question was how do you advertise? So I find two resources that are very valuable. One of them I hate, but it's just a known evil, which would be Facebook. Facebook, even though I personally am not a big fan of it, I use it. I can't help. Yeah, I've got a large following there, so I'm stuck. But the beauty of Facebook is that they have deep penetration in many countries, so you can target ads specifically to certain countries, you know, certain keywords, etc. It gives you a lot of flexibility as far as, you know, if you want to target truck drivers in that live near, you know, a 20-mile radius of Berlin, I can do that if I want to. Okay. You know, whereas the other one is AMS, usually through Amazon, which is, I find, probably the most practical and the one that makes the most sense on paper anyway, because that's where the point of sale interactions go. And I would say that a lot of marketing is paid, but once you start selling, a lot of marketing becomes free, because you got also bots and stuff like that. Like if you look at my name, I'm listed with Lee Child and a whole bunch of these other people going, well, great, you know. And if someone's looking at one of those serious authors, they might actually see one of my books listed underneath as a suggestion, which is free advertising. I don't pay for that, so
That's awesome.
you know, that's
Great.
that's hopefully the way it works for everybody.
So Judith, how much work does it go into promoting the market once it is translated?
We have to be realistic. It has to be the same level of work at marketing, right? Whether you hire somebody else to do it for you or whether you do it yourself. At the end of the day, you can't have a book translated and put it out and then hope that it sells, right?
So you have to work for it.
You have to.
It's
You
just,
and again, whether you do it yourself or you hire someone else, and Jens, obviously, he's been doing the active work in the German market, and we have David Beers, who was doing the U.S. marketing, and now he's coming to international and providing his time, because now we go beyond German. But for the longest time, and Jens can speak to his process from the operational side, the marketing. And again, we're KU exclusive, so we're different, because we're following the model, right, that we have in the U.S. So for Italian, German, and French, we're KU exclusive. I'll tell you that in Dutch, we're wide, and we've had the hardest time. We can't crack that nut.
I think we have time I just got the resign,
Yeah.
so we have time for maybe one.
Really fast, yeah. We tried back then to get an initial audience by Facebook advertising, because back then AMS advertising wasn't available in German. And now we are doing a mix of both, because it's important to get a bunch of readers that are picking up your books, so you're getting up the rank, you are shown to other readers. So it's like a self-fueling engine.
So you have to work the local market. So we had a couple questions. Go ahead.
Hi, thank you. We're kind of delving into we decided to go into the German market. And some of the things one of the things we understood was that hiring a German translator, there's a rights. They own the rights to that translated piece. So, is it normal, or can you write up a contract that relinquishes those rights? And is that even valuable, because the German law might override that?
So I can say personally that my contracts are written such that I own everything after.
So do we.
Can I talk about generally in German?
Yes. Yes. So let me. So it depends, right? Legal answer. It depends. We maintain that our work for hire, because these are work for hire contracts, that we own the intellectual property. Now, arguably, the German country is a different country, so they could come back and argue. So all I can say is that we maintain from the get-go that we own the copyright. So anybody that works with us.
And if I can point out just to that, you should not. We need to be careful with U.S. jurisdiction and German jurisdiction or Spanish jurisdiction. There are laws that may directly contradict what a U.S. contract says. So if a U.S. contract says a person may be giving up the rights, that country does not contemplate that possibility.
They may not recognize that.
No.
Right.
So they'll contemplate in the U.S., but not right there.
For example, in Germany, it's yet you can't give up the creation rights, but you can give up the usage rights. So in this case, the creation rights are there, but the usage rights are all put over.
Okay,
that you can do.
Let's try to squeeze that. There was one more question, I think, or yeah, I think we can squeeze it in real quick. And just if anybody wants to see the PowerPoint or the numbers, they can email me and I'm happy to send it. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, I'm just wondering.
A little closer.
How you deal with dialects? Because my story's set in Montreal, Canada. Very different, especially when you come to swearing, to Paris, France. And how I don't want to have two translations, obviously, but how do you deal with that in Spanish too? Obviously,
Right.
there's a big.
In
Well,
Spanish, we get that question a lot.
Yeah, so in Spanish, there's that particular thing. It's the same language, but there are different expressions. So it's called in Spanish, it's called, you're trying to always translate into neutral Spanish. So it's very much the same thing in English. You can think, the English that a person from Scotland speaks, or Australia, or New York, there are going to be different modisms, different things, different expressions. So when you're translating and you're targeting the market, and Michael was talking about writing on ideas that are already popular in those markets, you just try to use neutral language. You don't have to always. High literature sometimes uses local expressions. It depends, but it is relatively easy to choose a language that is neutral.
Okay, so you should choose your translator in, obviously.
That problem will be familiar to any translator, any
okay.
professional translator that you work with will understand that, whether it's in French and Spanish or any other language.
Okay.
German also has the same, high German, low German. I think we're right on time. We got 3, 2, 1 second. Okay, guys, thank you so much. Thank you to Michael, Judith, and Jens. And And do it right at home. On the spot.